The dust hung thick in the air that summer of 1887, coating everything in Cedar Ridge with a fine layer of red-brown grit. The small town sat precariously between civilization and wilderness, where the Great Plains met the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. It was a place where fortunes were made and lost on cattle drives, where the law was whatever the strongest man said it was, and where the scorching summers could kill a man as surely as the brutal winters that followed. Cedar Ridge had seen its share of hard men, but none commanded respect or fear, quite like Samuel "Sam" Thornton. At 35, he owned more land than any three men combined, his Double T Ranch sprawling across 20,000 acres of prime grazing land. His cattle numbered in the thousands. His horses were the finest in 3 counties, and his word carried weight from Denver to Santa Fe. Sam Thornton was not a man accustomed to being told no. On this particular August morning, he rode into town with his usual swagger, his black stallion kicking up clouds of dust as he made his way down Main Street. His fine leather boots, custom made in San Francisco, clicked against the wooden sidewalk as he dismounted outside Murphy's General Store. The townspeople gave him a wide berth, tipping their hats respectfully while avoiding direct eye contact. Sam liked it that way. "Mornin', Mr. Thornton," called out Jake Murphy from behind his counter, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for men who could make or break your business with a single word. Sam merely nodded, his attention already drawn to the commotion gathering at the far end of town near the stockyards. A crowd had formed, their excited voices carrying on the hot wind. Curiosity piqued. Sam strode toward the gathering, his spurs jingling with each step. What he found was the monthly auction, not of cattle or horses, but of human labor. Desperate souls who'd come west seeking fortune only to find hardship stood on a makeshift platform, offering their services to the highest bidder. It was a common enough sight in these parts, where a man's worth was measured in how much work he could do before the sun set. Sam was about to turn away. He had all the hands he needed, when something caught his eye. At the far edge of the platform, almost hidden in shadow, stood a woman unlike any he'd seen before. She was tall for a woman, nearly 6 feet, with wild dark hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her clothes were little more than rags, a man's shirt torn at the elbows, leather breeches patched with different fabrics, and boots held together with strips of rawhide. But it was her bearing that made Sam pause. While others on the platform hung their heads or pleaded with the crowd, she stood straight-backed and silent, her eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "What about this one?" the auctioneer called out, gesturing toward her with obvious distaste. Mountain woman, brought down from the high country. Strong as an ox, they say, can work from dawn to dusk without complaint. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Mountain people were considered barely better than savages by the townfolk, wild, unpredictable, and generally best avoided. "She got a name?" someone shouted. "Won't say," the auctioneer replied. "Won't say much of anything, but she's got all her teeth and no visible ailments. Start the bidding at $5? More laughter. $5 was insulting, even for a day laborer. No one bid. $3? Still nothing. Sam found himself studying her more closely. Her face was weathered by sun and wind, but underneath the dirt and exhaustion, there was something else. Her eyes, when they briefly swept over the crowd, were the color of winter sky, pale blue-gray and utterly cold. There was no fear in them, no pleading, only a fierce, quiet dignity that seemed at odds with her current circumstances. An idea formed in Sam's mind, an amusing thought that grew into something more. The town had been dull lately, and he'd grown bored with the usual entertainments. What better way to liven things up than to bring home this wild creature? His friends at the Cattlemen's Club would get a good laugh out of it. Sam Thornton, richest man in 3 counties, keeping a mountain woman like some sort of exotic pet. $10, Sam called out, his voice cutting through the crowd's chatter. Every head turned. The auctioneer's eyes widened. "Mr. Thornton, $10, you say? You heard me. But, sir, surely you don't need—" "I said $10. Sam's tone brooked no argument. "Unless someone wants to bid higher?" "Of course. No one did. Within minutes, the transaction was complete. Sam approached the platform as the crowd parted before him, whispers following in his wake. "Well, looks like you're coming with me," he said to the woman, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Can you ride?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Sam felt an unexpected chill despite the heat. Her gaze seemed to see right through his expensive clothes and confident manner to something else beneath. But she only nodded once, sharply. "Good, my horse can carry 2. He turned to the auctioneer. "Have her things sent to the Double T." "Things?" The man laughed nervously. "Sir, she didn't come with nothing but what she's wearing and this." He held up a small leather pouch, worn smooth with age. Sam took it, feeling something hard inside, stones, maybe, or bones. Mountain folk were known for their strange superstitions. He tossed it back to her, and she caught it one-handed, tucking it inside her shirt without a word. The ride back to the ranch was accomplished in silence. She sat behind him on the stallion, and he was surprised to find she rode well, moving with the horse's gait rather than fighting it. Her hands, where they gripped his waist for balance, were calloused and strong. Word traveled fast in Cedar Ridge. By the time they reached the Double T's main gate, a small crowd of ranch hands had gathered, eager to see what their boss had brought home. Sam enjoyed their shocked expressions as he helped the mountain woman dismount. "Boys," he announced with a grin, "meet our new guest. She'll be staying in the old cabin out past the barn. Make sure she has what she needs." Tom Rodriguez, his foreman, stepped forward cautiously. "Boss, what exactly will she be doing here?" Sam's grin widened. "Whatever needs doing, I suppose. Think of her as entertainment." The men laughed uneasily, unsure how to react. The woman stood perfectly still, watching them all with those unsettling pale eyes. "What's your name, woman?" Tom asked. She didn't answer. "She don't talk much," Sam explained, already enjoying the story he'd tell at the club tomorrow. "Mountain folk are like that, half wild, you know." More laughter. Bolder now. Someone made a joke about teaching her to speak proper English. Another wondered aloud if she even understood them. Through it all, she remained silent, her face expressionless. But Sam, watching her closely, thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, not fear or anger, but something else. Patience, perhaps, the kind of patience a mountain cat shows before it strikes. That night, as Sam sat in his study enjoying a glass of imported whiskey, he couldn't shake the image of her standing on that platform, dignified despite everything. He'd brought her here as a joke, a conversation piece, something to amuse himself and shock the proper ladies of Cedar Ridge. But already, he sensed there was more to this mountain woman than he'd bargained for. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, and Sam could have sworn he heard an answering call from the direction of the old cabin. But that was impossible, he told himself. The whiskey was making him fanciful. Still, as he prepared for bed in his fine feather mattress, Sam Thornton, who feared no man and had never met a challenge he couldn't conquer, found himself wondering what exactly he'd brought into his perfectly ordered world. The mountain woman had been at the Double T Ranch for 2 weeks, and in that time, she'd spoken not a single word. She rose before dawn, worked until well past sunset, and retired to the old cabin without complaint. The ranch hands had quickly learned that their attempts at mockery fell on deaf ears, or at least, ears that chose not to respond. Sam watched from his study window as she hauled water from the well, her movements efficient and purposeful. She'd taken on the hardest tasks without being asked, mucking stalls, mending fences, breaking the ice on water troughs during the cold morning hours. Work that would leave grown men exhausted seemed to barely wind her. "She's unnatural, that one," Tom Rodriguez muttered, joining Sam at the window. "Yesterday, I saw her lift a fence post that takes 2 men to carry, and the horses, even that mean-tempered mare that bit Johnny last month, they all go calm when she's near." Sam took a sip of his morning coffee. "Superstitious nonsense. Tom." "Maybe so, but the boys are getting spooked. They say she don't sleep. Miguel swears he saw her sitting outside her cabin at 3 in the morning, just staring at the mountains like she was waiting for something. The boys should mind their own business, Sam said sharply, though he too had noticed her strange nocturnal habits. Tom shifted uncomfortably. What exactly are your plans for her, boss? I mean, if she's just here to work, we could use the help, but she's here because I say she's here, Sam replied, his tone ending the discussion. Truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself anymore. The joke had seemed funnier 2 weeks ago. That evening, Sam made his weekly trip to town, stopping at the Brass Lantern Saloon where the Cattlemen's Club held their informal meetings. The moment he walked in, the conversation stopped. Well, well, drawled Harrison Pike, owner of the neighboring Lazy H Ranch. If it ain't the man who bought himself a wild woman? Laughter rippled through the group. Sam forced a grin and signaled for whiskey. Heard you got her working like a mule, said another rancher. William Carver. My boys say she does the work of 3 men. She earns her keep, Sam said casually. That all she does? Pike's tone was suggestive, and more laughter followed. Sam's jaw tightened, but he maintained his smile. Now, Harry, you know I'm a gentleman. A gentleman who keeps a mountain savage in his barn. Someone called out. The old cabin, Sam corrected, his voice carrying an edge. And she's no savage, just different. Different? Pike leaned back in his chair. My wife saw her in town last week, buying supplies. Said she looked like something that crawled out of a cave. Hair all wild, clothes held together with prayers. The decent women crossed the street to avoid her. Your wife crosses the street to avoid her own shadow, Sam shot back, drawing laughs. But the ribbing continued throughout the evening. Every man had a joke, a comment, a sly observation about Sam's pet mountain woman. By the time he left, Sam's temper was frayed and his pride stung. He'd brought her here for amusement. Yes, but being the butt of the joke himself wasn't part of the plan. He rode home through the darkness, fuming. As he approached the ranch, he saw a light in the old cabin, not lamplight, but the flickering of a small fire. Curiosity overrode his anger, and he dismounted quietly, approaching on foot. Through the single window, he could see her sitting cross-legged on the floor, feeding small twigs to a tiny fire in a circle of stones. She was sewing something. His shirt, he realized with surprise. One he'd torn on barbed wire and tossed aside for rags. Her fingers moved with surprising delicacy, the rough hands gentle on the fabric. She was humming, so softly he could barely hear it. The melody was unlike anything he knew, wild and mournful, rising and falling like wind through canyon walls. For a moment, Sam forgot his anger, forgot the jokes at the saloon, forgot everything except the strange scene before him. Then she looked up, straight at the window, those pale eyes meeting his in the darkness. Sam jerked back, embarrassed to be caught spying. He half expected her to come storming out, but she simply returned to her sewing as if he'd never been there. He retreated to the main house, unsettled. The next morning brought trouble. 3 of his prime cattle were found dead near the eastern pasture, torn apart by what looked like wolves. Sam rode out with Tom and several hands to investigate. Wolves don't usually come this close, Tom said, studying the tracks. And look here, these prints are huge. Sam dismounted to examine them. Tom was right. These were the largest wolf tracks he'd ever seen. As they discussed what to do, he noticed the mountain woman had appeared, standing at the edge of the group. You know anything about this? He asked her, not really expecting an answer. To his surprise, she walked forward and knelt by the tracks. She studied them intently, then looked toward the mountains. When she stood, she pointed northeast, toward the high country. Pack, she said, her voice rough from disuse. Big pack. Hungry, early snow coming. Everyone stared. It was the most she'd said since arriving. How do you know about early snow? Tom demanded. She pointed to the sky, then to the grass, then to the mountains again. Her meaning was clear enough. She could read the signs. Nonsense, one of the hands muttered. It's barely September. She shrugged and walked away, returning to her work. But 3 days later, the temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight. A week after that, the first snow fell, a month earlier than usual. The men looked at her differently after that, with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Sam began seeking her out, curious despite himself. He'd find excuses to check on whatever task she was doing, watching her work. She never acknowledged his presence, but he sensed she was aware of him. One evening, he found her in the barn, tending to an injured colt. "What happened?" he asked. "Wire," she said simply, not looking up from her work. Her hands were gentle on the animal's leg, and the colt, which had been fighting the other hands all day, stood perfectly still for her. "You know about doctoring animals?" "Some." He watched her clean and wrap the wound with practiced efficiency. "Where did you learn?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, "Mountains teach, if you listen." "And what else do the mountains teach?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Sam felt that same chill he'd experienced at the auction. Survival, truth. What matters? And what matters? "Not what you think," she said quietly, returning to the colt. Sam felt his temper flare. "You don't know what I think." "No?" She stood, wiping her hands on a rag. "You think power is in money, in land, in making others small so you feel big." She moved past him toward the door. "Mountains know better. Wind breaks the mighty oak but bends around grass." "Is that some kind of mountain wisdom?" he called after her, sarcasm thick in his voice. She paused at the door. "It's truth. You brought me here for sport, to show you could, but mountains are patient. We endure." Then she was gone, leaving Sam alone with the colt and his wounded pride. He told himself he should be angry at her impertinence. Instead, he found himself thinking about her words late into the night, the next time he went to town. The jokes at the saloon seemed hollow. When Pike made another crude comment about his pet, Sam found himself defending her. "She saved that colt everyone said would have to be put down," he said, "and she predicted the early snow. Maybe mountain folk know things we don't." The men laughed, but uneasily now. Sam Thornton defending the wild woman? What was the world coming to? Riding home that night, Sam realized something had shifted. The woman he'd brought here as a joke had somehow become... what? He didn't have words for it. All he knew was that when he saw the light in her cabin window, something in his chest eased, like coming home to a hearth fire after a long, cold ride. But pride was a hard thing to swallow, especially for a man like Sam Thornton. So he continued the charade, telling himself and others that she was nothing more than an amusing oddity, even as he found more and more excuses to seek out her quiet company. The mountain woman, for her part, continued as she had begun, working, watching, and waiting with the patience of stone and seasons. And if sometimes Sam caught her looking toward the mountains with an expression of profound sadness, he told himself it wasn't his concern. After all, he'd bought her fair and square. She was his to do with as he pleased, wasn't she? The dust storm came out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. Sam had seen plenty of them in his years on the ranch, but this one was different. A wall of red-brown earth that rose like a living thing from the horizon, blotting out the sun and turning day to an eerie twilight. "Get the livestock to shelter," Tom Rodriguez shouted over the rising wind, but his words were nearly lost in the roar. Men scattered in all directions, trying to herd cattle and horses toward the barns. Sam pulled his bandana over his mouth and nose, squinting through the stinging grit as he helped drive a group of yearlings toward safety. The wind howled like a thing possessed, and visibility dropped to mere feet. In the chaos, Sam lost track of his men. He'd just gotten the last of the yearlings into the barn when he remembered the pregnant mares in the far pasture, fighting against the wind. He made his way toward them, but the dust was so thick he could barely breathe. Then, through the brown haze, he saw her. The mountain woman moved through the storm as if it were a gentle breeze. Her wild hair whipped around her face, but she didn't stumble or hesitate. She'd fashioned some kind of covering from a horse blanket, wrapped around her head and shoulders, leaving only her eyes visible. Those pale eyes found his through the dust. She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the tool shed. Sam wanted to protest. The mares needed help, but she was surprisingly strong, and the dust was filling his lungs. Inside the shed, he doubled over, coughing. "The mares," he gasped out. "Safe," she said, handing him a water-soaked rag. "Breathe through this. How do you know they're safe?" "Because I moved them an hour ago." She was already gathering supplies, rope, canvas, more blankets. "Saw the storm coming." "That's impossible. It came out of nowhere." She gave him a look that might have been pity. "Birds flew east this morning. Horses were restless. Air tasted of copper." She shouldered the supplies. "Storm's not done. Worse coming." Before Sam could respond, she was back out in the storm. He followed, trying to keep up as she moved with uncanny certainty through the blinding dust. They found Miguel and two other hands huddled behind an overturned wagon, disoriented and frightened. "This way," she commanded, and for once, no one questioned her authority. She led them to the main barn, where most of the others had gathered. "Where's Tom?" Sam asked, doing a quick head count. "Went after the new bull. Someone said, 'That damned expensive one you bought last month.'" Sam cursed. That bull had cost him a fortune, but no animal was worth a man's life. He moved toward the door, but the mountain woman blocked his path. "I'll go," she said. "Like hell. That's my foreman out there. And you're blind in this dust." She was already wrapping her face again. "I know how to move in storms. You don't." It galled him to admit she was right, but Sam stepped aside. She disappeared into the brown wall outside, and the minutes that followed felt like hours. The wind screamed and threw debris against the barn walls. One of the younger hands started praying in Spanish. Then, miraculously, the barn door opened. Tom stumbled in, supported by the mountain woman. His face was scraped raw by the sand, and he was coughing violently, but he was alive. "The bull?" Sam asked, once Tom could speak. "Dead," Tom gasped. Panicked, ran straight into the ravine. She tried to turn him, but... Sam looked at the woman. There was blood on her hands. She'd been rope burned trying to save a bull that meant nothing to her. The storm raged for 3 more hours. Under her direction, they sealed the barn's gaps with wet blankets, created a makeshift ventilation system to keep the air breathable, and rationed the water. When frightened horses threatened to kick down their stalls, she moved among them, humming that strange mountain melody, and they calmed as if by magic. By the time the wind finally died, she'd taken charge completely, and not a single man had questioned it. When they emerged to survey the damage, Sam expected the worst, but while there was plenty of cleanup needed, they hadn't lost a single animal except for the bull or man. "How?" Sam asked her quietly, as the men dispersed to check their various responsibilities. "How did you know exactly what to do?" She unwrapped the blanket from her head, shaking out her tangled hair. "Survived worse," she said simply. "Mountains have storms that make this look like spring rain." "You saved Tom's life. Probably saved several lives today." She looked at him with those unsettling eyes. "It's what people do. When storms come, people help people. Or should." The rebuke was gentle but clear. Sam felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the fading storm. Over the next days, as they worked to repair the storm damage, Sam noticed a change in how the men treated her. The mockery was gone, replaced by genuine respect. They asked her opinion on weather signs, sought her help with injured animals, and some even attempted conversation, though she remained largely silent. Tom, especially, seemed changed. "I owe her my life," he told Sam one evening. "I was done for out there. That bullet dragged me near to the ravine edge. She cut the rope just in time. Took a hell of a beating from it, too. Never seen anything like it. She's full of surprises." Sam agreed, watching her work on repairing a section of fence in the distance. "Boss," Tom said carefully, "the boys and I been talking. It ain't right. Her living in that old cabin, Not after what she did. Maria's cleaned out the room above the main barn, its proper quarters, with a real bed and stove. Sam's first instinct was to refuse. Keeping her in the cabin maintained a distance, a reminder of her place. But looking at Tom's earnest face and remembering her blood-stained hands from trying to save his expensive bull, the words died in his throat. "Ask her," he said finally. "If she wants to move, she can." But when Tom made the offer, she politely declined. The cabin suited her fine. She said she was used to solitude. That night, Sam found himself walking toward her cabin without quite meaning to. The sky was clear, stars brilliant in the post-storm air. He found her sitting outside, as was her habit, looking toward the mountains. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the ground beside her. She nodded slightly. He sat, feeling awkward and out of place. "You showed us all up today," he said after a moment. "Made us look like greenhorns." "Wasn't my intent." "What was your intent?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Survival. Storm doesn't care who owns what, who's rich or poor. It just is. You either work together or you perish." "Is that what happened to your people? They didn't work together." Her hands clenched slightly in her lap. "My people worked together fine. It was your people who didn't see us as worth working with." The accusation hung between them. Sam wanted to defend himself, to point out he wasn't responsible for whatever had happened to her family. But the words felt hollow before he could speak them. "I'm sorry," he said instead, surprising himself. "For whatever happened, and for bringing you here the way I did?" She turned to look at him, studying his face in the starlight. "Are you?" It was a fair question. Was he sorry? Or just feeling guilty because she'd proven herself more capable than he'd ever imagined? "I don't know," he admitted. "I thought I wanted—" "You wanted a toy, a curiosity, something to make you feel powerful." Her voice held no anger, just quiet certainty. "It's what men like you do." "And what kind of man am I?" "The kind who's never been tested, never been hungry, never had to choose between pride and survival." She stood, brushing off her worn breeches. "But maybe not just that kind. You stayed today. Helped. Didn't have to." She started toward her cabin, then paused. "That bull you lost? Worth more than you paid for me, yet you cared more about Tom's life than the money. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Samuel Thornton." It was the first time she'd used his name, coming from her lips. It sounded like both a judgment and a possibility. Sam sat there long after she'd gone inside, looking at the stars and thinking. The woman he'd bought as a joke had saved his men, his animals, and quite possibly his ranch from disaster. She'd taken charge when needed, stepped back when the crisis passed, and asked for nothing in return. The sound of her humming drifted through the cabin window, that wild, mournful tune that seemed to carry all the loneliness of the mountains. For the first time, Sam wondered what memories that melody held, what losses it mourned. He thought of her words. Storm doesn't care who owns what. Neither, it seemed, did she. And that, Sam was beginning to realize, might be the most unsettling thing about her. In a world built on ownership and hierarchy, she moved as if such things were as insubstantial as dust on the wind. The question was, what did that make him in her eyes? And why was he beginning to care so much about the answer? The Cedar Ridge Harvest Fair was the social event of the season, drawing folks from 50 miles around. Colorful bunting stretched between buildings. Fiddle music filled the air, and the smell of roasted corn and apple cider drifted from vendor stalls. It was a day when ranchers showed off their finest horses. Women displayed their needlework, and everyone pretended that social divisions didn't exist, at least for a few hours. Sam Thornton stood before his mirror, adjusting his string tie. He'd decided to bring the mountain woman to the fair, though he couldn't quite articulate why. Perhaps it was the way the ranch hands now spoke of her with respect. Perhaps it was simple curiosity about how she'd react to such a gathering. Or perhaps, though he didn't care to examine this too closely, it was because he wanted her company. He found her mending harnesses in the barn. "The fair's today," he said. "Thought you might like to come along." She looked up from her work, those pale eyes unreadable. Why? Everyone goes. It's tradition. Good food, music, dancing. That's not what I asked. Sam felt heat rise in his neck. Does there need to be a reason? I'm offering you a day away from work. She studied him for a long moment, then set aside the harness. All right. An hour later, they rode toward town in Sam's best buggy. He'd offered to buy her a proper dress for the occasion, but she'd refused, wearing instead her cleanest shirt and breeches. Her hair was braided back, revealing more of her face than usual. In the morning light, Sam noticed things he'd overlooked before. The fine bones of her cheeks, the determined set of her jaw, the way her eyes seemed to hold depths like mountain lakes. You're staring, she said without looking at him. Sorry, you look different with your hair pulled back. Different how? Sam searched for words. Less wild, I suppose. Disappointed? No, he said quickly. Just different. As they entered town, heads turned. Whispers followed their passage down Main Street. Sam kept his expression neutral, nodding to acquaintances as if bringing the mountain woman to the fair was the most natural thing in the world. They left the buggy with the livery boy and walked toward the fairgrounds. Sam noticed how she tensed as the crowds pressed closer, her hand moving unconsciously to where a knife would hang if she were armed. Easy, he murmured. It's just a fair. Too many people. She said quietly. Too much noise. We don't have to stay long. But before they could retreat, Harrison Pike's wife, Eleanor, swept toward them with several other society ladies in tow. Eleanor Pike was Cedar Ridge's self-appointed arbiter of morality and propriety, a thin woman with a smile sharp as winter wind. Why, Mr. Thornton, she said, her voice carrying to ensure an audience. How unusual to see you here with your, what should we call her, your employee? The mountain woman stood perfectly still, but Sam saw her hands clench slightly. Sam realized with a start that he'd never asked her name. In 2 months, he'd never thought to ask. The shame of it burned through him. I see, Eleanor continued, her smile widening. You don't even know her name. How modern of you, keeping a nameless creature like some sort of pet. Mrs. Pike, Sam began, his voice carrying warning, but Eleanor wasn't finished. Tell me, dear, she said, addressing the mountain woman directly. Do you understand proper English, or should I speak slower? She turned to her companions. You know what they say about mountain people, barely more civilized than the savages they probably bred with. The crowd around them had grown, drawn by the prospect of drama. Sam saw familiar faces, ranchers he did business with, their wives, townspeople who relied on his patronage, all watching, waiting to see how he'd handle this. The mountain woman stepped forward, and Eleanor instinctively moved back. When she spoke, her voice carried clear and strong across the suddenly silent fairground. He brought me here to be a joke, she said, looking directly at Eleanor but speaking to everyone. Bought me like livestock to amuse himself and others. But here's what's funny. He thinks owning land and cattle makes him powerful. You think wearing fine clothes and looking down on others makes you righteous. She turned in a slow circle, addressing the crowd. But you're all jokes before God. Every one of you who judges by appearance, who mistakes cruelty for strength, who builds yourself up by tearing others down. She faced Sam then, and he felt the full weight of her gaze. He paid $10 for me, $10 to own another human being for sport. Tell me, good Christians of Cedar Ridge, who here is the savage? The silence was absolute. Eleanor's face had gone from pale to red to pale again. Several men shuffled their feet, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Some of the women clutched their children closer, though whether from fear or shame, Sam couldn't tell. I have a name, the mountain woman continued, her voice quieter now but still carrying. It's Grace Fletcher. My family settled in these mountains 3 generations ago, back when this town was nothing but a trading post. We minded our own business, lived off the land, hurt no one, until men like him, she gestured to Sam, decided our land was worth more than our lives. She looked around one more time, then walked away through the parting crowd, her back straight and head high. Sam stood frozen, Eleanor's words and Grace's response echoing in his ears. The crowd began to disperse, voices rising in shocked whispers. He heard his name repeatedly, felt the weight of judgment in every glance. "Well," Eleanor said, trying to reclaim her composure, "I suppose that's what comes of bringing wild creatures into civilized company." Something snapped in Sam. "Shut your mouth. Eleanor?" She gasped. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. That woman, Grace, has more dignity in her little finger than you have in your entire corseted body. She saved my foreman's life, predicted the storm that could have destroyed half the county's livestock, and works harder than any 3 men I employ. What have you done lately besides spread gossip and judgment?" Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Harrison Pike pushed through the crowd, his face thunderous. "Thornton, you can't speak to my wife that way." "I just did." Sam looked around at the gathered faces, many of whom had laughed at his mountain woman jokes in the saloon. "And every one of you who finds her truth uncomfortable might want to look in a mirror and ask why." He strode away, leaving chaos in his wake. He found Grace at the edge of the fairgrounds, standing beneath a cottonwood tree, looking toward the mountains. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what? Bringing me here, buying me, making me into your joke?" "Yes, all of it, for not even asking your name." She turned to him then. "You want to know what's really funny? You could have just hired me. I was desperate enough, family dead, land stolen, winter coming. I'd have worked for food and shelter, but you had to buy me, had to own me, because that's what men like you do." The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. "I'm sorry," he repeated, knowing how inadequate the words were. "Sorry doesn't give me back my dignity, doesn't erase what you did." "Then what would?" She studied him for a long moment. "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe you live with it, like I live with watching my family die, my home burn, everything I loved destroyed by men who thought they had the right because they had the power." They stood in silence, the distant sounds of the fair a mocking counterpoint to the weight between them. Finally, Grace spoke again. "The woman, Eleanor, she called me savage. You know what savage means? It means of the forest. Wild, free. If that's savage, then yes, I am. But I've never bought another human being for sport." Sam had no answer to that. They walked back to the buggy in silence, past clusters of fairgoers who stopped talking as they passed. The ride home felt endless. The distance between them on the buggy seat might as well have been an ocean. As they reached the ranch, Grace finally spoke. "You defended me, back there. Why?" Sam considered his words carefully. "Because Eleanor was wrong. Because what she said was cruel and unfair. Because—" He paused, then admitted, "because I've come to respect you. More than respect. Don't," her voice was sharp. "Don't make this into something it's not. You bought me, until that changes. Nothing else matters." She climbed down from the buggy and walked toward her cabin without looking back. Sam sat there long after she'd gone, holding the reins of horses that stood patiently waiting for direction he didn't know how to give. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, wild and free and unbought. Sam wondered if Grace heard it too, and if she answered in the quiet of her cabin, speaking a language he was only beginning to understand he needed to learn. The aftermath of the harvest fair rippled through Cedar Ridge like stones thrown in still water. Within days, the town had divided into camps. Those who thought Sam Thornton had lost his mind defending that wild woman, and those who grudgingly admitted she'd spoken truths that needed saying. At the Double T Ranch, the change was more subtle, but no less profound. Grace continued her work, but something had shifted. She no longer ate alone, accepting Tom Rodriguez's repeated invitations to join the hands at the cookhouse for meals. The men, who'd witnessed her courage during the dust storm and heard about her confrontation with Eleanor Pike, treated her with a mixture of respect and careful distance. Sam, for his part, found himself watching her constantly, though he tried to be subtle about it. Her words at the fair haunted him. "You bought me. Until that changes, nothing else matters." One evening, unable to concentrate on his ledgers, he walked to her cabin. He found her sitting outside as usual, but this time she wasn't looking at the mountains. She was crying, silently, tears streaming down her weathered face while she held something in her lap. Grace. He'd been using her name deliberately since the fair, trying to make up for months of not asking. She didn't startle or try to hide her tears. "Today's the date," she said quietly. 2 years since they came. Sam sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Will you tell me?" For a long moment, only the wind spoke. Then, so quietly he had to strain to hear, she began. "We had a small place up in Devil's Canyon. Nothing fancy. Cabin, some cattle, a vegetable garden, my father, mother, 2 brothers, and me. We'd been there since I was born. Had papers proving the land was ours fair and square." She paused, wiping her face with her sleeve. "But papers don't mean much when someone powerful wants what you have." "A group of men came, said they'd found gold traces in the creek running through our land, offered to buy us out for a fraction of what it was worth. Your father refused." "Of course he did. It was our home." Her hands clenched around whatever she held. "They came back at night. 20 men, maybe more. Said we had an hour to leave or they'd burn us out." Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Papa tried to reason with them. Showed them our papers. Said we'd go to the law. They laughed." Her voice went flat, emotionless. "Shot him first, then Mama when she ran to him. My brothers fought. Daniel and James were good men, brave men. Didn't matter. Grace, I hid. Papa had made me promise, if trouble ever came, I was to hide in the root cellar and not come out no matter what. So I hid like a coward while my family died." "You survived. That's not cowardice." She turned to him then, eyes blazing through her tears. "Isn't it? I listened to them scream, smelled the smoke when they burned our home, stayed hidden for 2 days after, too scared to come out." She opened her hands, revealing what she'd been holding, the small leather pouch she'd carried since the auction. From it, she pulled a worn photograph, even in the fading light. Sam could see a family grouped before a modest cabin. Grace stood between 2 young men, her parents behind them, all smiling at the camera. "This is all I have left. This and memories and nightmares. The men who did it got away with it. I tried going to the law, but who was going to listen to a wild mountain girl with no proof but her word? The land records mysteriously disappeared. Nobody remembered seeing anything." She carefully returned the photograph to its pouch. "I survived that winter alone, God knows how. Come spring, I knew I couldn't stay in the mountains. Too many ghosts. So I came down, looking for work, and ended up on that auction block." They sat in silence as stars began appearing overhead. Sam's mind reeled with the weight of her story, the casual cruelty of it, the injustice that had driven her to the point where being bought for $10 seemed like survival. "The names," he said finally. "Do you remember any names?" "Every one." Her voice was hard as mountain granite, burned into my memory like brands. "Tell me." She looked at him suspiciously. "Why?" "Because maybe it's time someone with power used it for something other than taking what they want." She studied his face for a long moment, then began reciting names. Some Sam recognized, men of influence in neighboring counties. One, a judge. Another, a territorial senator's brother. The kind of men who could make land records disappear and silence complaints. "You can't fight them," Grace said when she finished. "They're too powerful, too connected. Watch me." "Why?" She turned to face him fully. "Why do you care? I'm nothing to you but a bad joke you're trying to make up for." "You're wrong." The words came out more forcefully than he intended. "You were never a joke to me. A mystery, maybe. A challenge to my assumptions. But never a joke. You brought me here for amusement. I brought you here because I was an arrogant fool who thought he understood the world. You've shown me how little I knew." He stood. decision crystallizing. I'm going to find out what happened to your land. If there's justice to be had, there's no justice for people like me. She stood too, clutching the pouch. There's only survival or death. I chose survival. But sometimes I wonder if I chose wrong. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. I'm nobody. Own nothing but the clothes on my back and ghosts in my heart. You felt sorry for me tonight. But tomorrow you'll remember who you are and who I am. And nothing will change. Everything's already changed, Sam said quietly. That day at the fair, when you spoke your truth, everything changed. I can't undo buying you like property. I can't give you back your family or your home, but I can try to make things right going forward. How? He pulled a document from his jacket, papers he'd been carrying for days, waiting for the right moment. These are freedom papers. Legal documents stating that any claim I had on you is null and void. You're free to leave whenever you want. Go wherever you choose. Grace took the papers with trembling hands, reading by the light spilling from her cabin window. Why now? Because you were right. Nothing else matters while I own you. So I'm changing that. You're free. Grace Fletcher. Free to stay. Free to go. Free to tell me to go to hell if you want. She looked at the papers, then at him, then back at the papers. If I'm free to go, why would I stay? Because this ranch needs you. The men respect you. The animals trust you. He paused, then added quietly, because I need you. Not as property, not as a worker, but as, I don't know what, I just know the thought of you leaving feels like losing something I didn't know I was looking for. Grace folded the papers carefully and put them in her pouch with the photograph. I need time to think, to understand what freedom means when you've got nowhere to go. Take all the time you need. The cabin's yours as long as you want it. The job's yours if you choose to stay. No strings, no expectations. She nodded slowly. Thank you for listening, for the papers, for caring about the truth. Sam turned to go, then looked back. Those men who killed your family, I meant what I said. There might not be justice in the law, but there are other kinds of justice, other ways to make things right. Don't make promises you can't keep. Samuel Thornton. I don't intend to. As he walked back to the main house, Sam's mind was already working. He had contacts, influence, ways of finding information. The men who'd destroyed Grace's family had made one crucial mistake. They'd left a witness now under the protection of one of the most powerful ranchers in the territory. Behind him, he heard Grace's voice raised in that wild, mournful song she sang to the mountains. But tonight, there was something different in it. Tonight, mixed with the sorrow. He thought he heard the faintest note of hope. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering and human hope alike. But Sam Thornton, who'd lived his life as if the world owed him everything, finally understood that sometimes the only wealth that mattered was the chance to make something right. And Grace Fletcher, who'd lost everything except her life and her dignity, held freedom papers in one hand and her family's photograph in the other, wondering if a cage could become a home when the door stood open, and if the man who'd bought her might somehow become the key to justice she'd thought forever lost. The riders came at dusk 3 weeks later, their horses' hooves drumming against the hard-packed earth like war drums. Sam was in his study when Tom Rodriguez burst through the door without knocking. "Boss, we got trouble. 8 men, maybe more, riding hard from the north. They're armed." Sam was already reaching for his gun belt. "Our men?" "Already taking positions. But Sam..." Tom's face was grim. "I recognized one of them. Jake Colson. He's got a reputation for hired gun work." Sam's blood ran cold. He'd been making inquiries about the men who'd killed Grace's family, using his connections carefully but persistently. Word must have gotten back. "Where's Grace?" "That's the thing. She rode out this morning to check the eastern boundary. Hasn't come back yet." Cursing, Sam strapped on his Colt. "Send Miguel and 2 others to find her. Tell them to be careful. The rest of us will meet our visitors." The riders had stopped just outside the ranch gate, spreading out in a loose semicircle. Sam recognized the type. Hard men who sold their guns to the highest bidder. The leader, presumably Coulson, was a lean man with dead eyes and a face marked by violence. "Evening, gentlemen," Sam called out, his own men flanking him. "Something I can help you with?" Coulson spit tobacco juice and smiled without warmth. "Sam Thornton, heard you've been asking questions about things that ain't your business." "I ask about a lot of things. You'll have to be more specific." "The Fletcher place up in Devil's Canyon. Old business. Best left buried." Coulson's hand rested casually on his gun. "My employer suggests you stop digging up the past. Might be healthier." "And if I don't?" "Well now, that'd be unfortunate. Man with a spread this nice, lot to lose. Buildings burn, cattle scatter, workers have accidents." His gaze swept over Sam's men. Even rich men can find themselves face down in the dirt if they're not careful. Sam felt his temper rise but kept his voice level. "Is that a threat, Coulson?" "Just friendly advice. See, we also heard you got yourself a mountain woman, the Fletcher girl who survived that tragic fire. Shame if something happened to her, too." The click of multiple hammers being cocked filled the air as Sam's men prepared for violence. But before anyone could move, a voice rang out from behind the visitors. "Looking for me?" Grace sat atop her horse on a small rise, the setting sun at her back turning her into a dark silhouette. She held a rifle with the easy competence of someone who knew how to use it. Coulson turned in his saddle. Well, Grace Fletcher, you've grown up some since that night in the canyon." "Jake Coulson." Her voice was steady as stone. "Still doing other men's dirty work. I see." "Pays well. Your family should have taken the offer when they had the chance." "The offer to steal our land for pennies? I think not." One of Coulson's men muttered something to him, gesturing urgently. Grace wasn't alone. Tom's riders had circled back and were positioned on the ridges around them, rifles glinting in the fading light. "Seems we've got ourselves a standoff," Coulson observed. "Question is, little girl, you ready to watch more people die for you? 'Cause that's what'll happen if this goes bad. No one has to die tonight." Sam interjected. "You've delivered your message. Now get off my land." "Not quite done yet." Coulson's eyes never left Grace. "See, my employer wants to know what the girl remembers. What she might have seen that night. What she might be planning to tell folks." "I remember everything," Grace said quietly, but her voice carried in the still air. "I remember you, Jake. Remember you laughing when you shot my father. Remember you holding my mother while Garrett Sinclair put a knife to her throat. Remember all 8 of you, standing in the firelight like demons." Several of Coulson's men shifted uneasily. Sam filed away the name. Garrett Sinclair. A powerful mine owner 2 counties over. "That's a dangerous memory to have," Coulson said. "More dangerous for you than me. See, I've got nothing left to lose. You took it all. But you," she gestured with her rifle, "you've got employers to protect, reputations to maintain, wealth built on blood. That's a lot to lose if the truth comes out. Truth needs proof. Girl, your word against respectable men, who's going to believe you? Maybe no one, maybe everyone. Want to take that chance?" The tension stretched tight as fence wire. Sam could feel his men's readiness, knew the situation balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move and the ranch would become a battlefield. Then Grace did something unexpected. She lowered her rifle. "But here's what you're going to tell Sinclair and the others. I'm done hiding, done running. They want to finish what they started. They know where to find me, but it won't be like before. I'm not a scared girl hiding in a root cellar anymore. And I'm not alone." She urged her horse forward, riding slowly through Coulson's men, who parted uncertainly. She stopped beside Sam, her presence somehow making him feel both protective and protected. "This is my home now," she continued. "These are my people. You come here again with violence in mind, and you'll find out what mountain justice looks like. We don't forget, Coulson, and we don't forgive, but we also don't start fights we don't mean to finish. Your choice." Coulson studied them both for a long moment, calculating odds. Whatever he saw in their faces, in the determined stance of the ranch hands, in the rifles on the ridges, made him nod slowly. Message delivered and received. We'll be going. He turned his horse, then looked back. But this ain't over, girl. Blood debts have a way of coming due. Yes, Grace agreed quietly. They do. The riders departed in a cloud of dust, watched by every hand on the double T until they were out of sight. Only then did Sam release the breath he'd been holding. Tom, double the night watch. Nobody rides alone until further notice. He turned to Grace. That includes you. She dismounted, and he saw her hands trembling slightly now that the immediate danger had passed. Without thinking, he reached out to steady her. You know them, Coulson and the others. I know them all, carved their faces in my memory while I listened to my family die. She looked up at him. They'll be back. With more men, Sinclair doesn't leave witnesses. Then we'll be ready. This isn't your fight. Sam, you gave me my freedom. I won't have more blood on my conscience. You think I'm going to let you face them alone? He gripped her shoulders gently. Grace, this became my fight the moment I decided to find justice for your family. Hell, maybe it became my fight the moment I bought you, thinking I had the right. Either way, I'm in it now. Around them, the ranch hands were dispersing, but Sam caught their glances. To a man, they looked ready to fight. Grace had earned their loyalty through sweat and courage. Now she had their protection. They'll try to burn us out, Grace said. It's what they do. Take everything, leave nothing but ashes. Let them try. This isn't an isolated mountain cabin. This is the double T, and I've got friends too. Judges who aren't bought, lawmen who believe in justice, fellow ranchers who don't take kindly to hired guns threatening the peace. Grace studied his face. Why? Why risk everything for my fight? Sam struggled to find the right words. Because a wise woman once told me that storms don't care who owns what. We either work together or perish. Well, there's a storm coming, and I'd rather face it with you than hide behind my money and position while injustice wins again. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we do this smart. Coulson was right about one thing. My word alone isn't enough. We need proof, evidence, something that ties Sinclair and the others to the murders. What kind of proof? A grim smile touched her lips. The kind they think burned with my family's cabin. My father was a careful man. Sam, he kept records, copies of everything, including some very interesting correspondence about those gold traces they claimed to find. Where? Hidden, safe, where they'd never think to look. She glanced toward the mountains. But retrieving them means going back, means facing those ghosts again. You won't face them alone, Sam promised. Never again. As darkness settled over the ranch, they stood together, no longer owner and property, no longer rancher and mountain woman, but something new. Allies united by purpose, bound by the approach of violence, and perhaps, just perhaps, connected by something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. In the distance, a wolf howled. And this time Sam was certain he heard Grace whisper something in response, not a howl, but words in a language he didn't recognize, ancient as the mountains themselves. A prayer, perhaps, or a promise. The storm was coming, but for the first time since that day at the auction, Sam Thornton felt ready for whatever it might bring, because for the first time in his privileged life, he had something worth fighting for besides himself. The attack came on a moonless night, swift and savage. Sam woke to the sound of gunfire and the orange glow of flames licking at the barn's east wall. He grabbed his rifle and boots, racing outside to find chaos erupting across the double T. They're trying to scatter the horses, Tom Rodriguez shouted over the din, firing at shadows moving among the corrals. Sam counted muzzle flashes, at least a dozen attackers, maybe more. They'd come prepared, striking multiple targets simultaneously. The hay barn was already ablaze, and riders were cutting fence lines to stampede the cattle. Where's Grace? Sam demanded, ducking as bullets splintered the porch railing beside him. Last I saw, she was heading for the main barn. Through the smoke and confusion, Sam spotted her. Grace had managed to save several horses from the burning structure and was now crouched behind a water trough, her rifle spitting fire at the attackers trying to advance on the main house. A figure emerged from the darkness. Jake Colson, his face demonic in the firelight. He was moving toward Grace's position, using the smoke as cover. Sam didn't think. He just moved, sprinting across open ground as bullets whistled past. "Grace, behind you!" She spun just as Colson raised his gun. Their shots rang out simultaneously. Colson staggered back, clutching his shoulder, while Grace's hat flew off, a bullet hole through the crown. Sam reached them as Colson fumbled for his fallen weapon. Without hesitation, Sam kicked it away and pressed his rifle to the man's chest. "Call them off," he growled. Colson laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "Too late for that. Thornton, you should have minded your own business." The firefight intensified. Sam's men had rallied, taking defensive positions. But they were outnumbered. The attackers seemed intent on maximum destruction. Buildings burned, fences cut, anything to cripple the ranch's operations. Grace suddenly grabbed Sam's arm. "The house! They're going for the house!" She was right. While the main fight raged near the barns, 3 men had circled around and were approaching the main house with torches. If they succeeded, everything would be lost. "Go," Sam told her. "I'll handle Colson." But Grace was already moving, not toward safety, but directly at the threat. Sam watched in amazement as she vaulted onto a loose horse, bareback, no bridle, and charged the would-be arsonists. It was like something out of an ancient war song. She guided the horse with her knees alone, rifle in her hands, her wild hair streaming behind her. The attackers, caught off guard by this apparition bearing down on them, hesitated a moment too long. Grace's first shot took one man in the leg, dropping him. She rode down the second, the horse's shoulder sending him flying. The third managed to throw his torch, but Grace leaped from the horse, tackling him before he could draw his gun. They rolled in the dirt, fighting viciously. Sam wanted to help, but Colson chose that moment to make a desperate lunge for a hidden derringer. Sam struck him with the rifle butt, ending the threat, then ran toward Grace. He needn't have worried. By the time he reached them, she had the man pinned, her knee on his throat, his own knife pressed to his chest. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man's eyes rolled with fear. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They'd been told the woman would be easy prey. "Answer her," Sam ordered, adding his gun to the equation. "Sinclair," the man gasped. "Garrett Sinclair said to burn it all, leave nothing." "How many men? 15? Maybe 20? I don't know." Grace increased the pressure. "Where's Sinclair now?" "Town, Cedar Ridge Hotel. Waiting for word it's done." The gunfire was dying down. Sam could hear Tom's voice shouting orders, the sound of horses being brought under control. The attack was failing, the remaining raiders beginning to retreat. Grace looked up at Sam, her face streaked with soot and dirt. "He's in town. Sinclair's in town right now. We'll get the sheriff. The sheriff's bought and paid for. You know it. I know it." She stood, hauling the terrified attacker to his feet. "But there's another way. The territorial marshal in Denver, Judge Patterson in Cheyenne. Men who can't be bought. We give them proof, testimony, witnesses." She was right. With captured attackers willing to talk, with Colson wounded and facing the noose, they finally had leverage. The next hours passed in a blur. The fires were brought under control, the damage assessed. They'd lost the hay barn and some fencing, but the main structures survived. More importantly, no one on their side had been killed, though several men nursed wounds. As dawn broke, they had 5 captured attackers, including Colson. The rest had fled into the darkness. Tom organized guards, while Sam sent riders to fetch the territorial marshal and spread word to trustworthy lawmen. Grace tended the wounded with the same quiet competence she brought to everything. Sam watched her bandage Miguel's burned hands, murmuring reassurances in Spanish she'd picked up from the vaqueros. "You saved my home," he said when she finally took a break. "Our home," she corrected quietly, then seemed surprised by her own words. I mean, the ranch. I couldn't let them destroy it. Grace, he waited until she met his eyes. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, charging those men like that. Not brave, angry. She looked toward the mountains, now painted gold by the rising sun. I hid once while everything burned, never again. You weren't a coward then. You were a child, following your father's orders. Maybe, but I'm not a child now. She turned back to him, and he saw steel in those pale eyes. Sinclair's still in town. He's waiting for word of victory. What do you say we deliver it personally? Sam understood immediately. You want to face him. I want him to see me. Want him to know he failed. Want to look him in the eye when the marshal takes him? A grim smile touched her lips. Call it mountain justice. Within an hour, they were riding toward Cedar Ridge. Sam, Grace, Tom, and a dozen armed ranch hands. They also brought 2 of the captured attackers, trussed and ready to testify. Word had already spread. They met the territorial marshal and his deputies on the road, summoned by Sam's urgent telegram. The confrontation at the Cedar Ridge Hotel would be talked about for years. Garrett Sinclair, eating breakfast in the dining room like a gentleman, looked up to find Grace Fletcher standing before him, very much alive and flanked by the law. Hello, Mr. Sinclair, she said calmly. I believe you've been looking for me. His face went through several expressions, shock, rage, calculation, before settling on false bravado. I don't know what you mean. Who is this woman? The girl who hid in a root cellar while you murdered her family. The witness you thought you'd silenced. The ghost you've been running from for 2 years. She leaned forward slightly. I'm still here, and I remember everything. The marshal stepped forward. Garrett Sinclair, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and attempted murder. We have witnesses, including your hired man Coulson, willing to testify. As they led Sinclair away, he turned back to Grace with pure hatred. This isn't over, girl. I have friends. Powerful friends. So do I, Grace replied simply. Glancing at Sam, the aftermath was swift. With Sinclair's arrest and the captured men's testimony, the whole conspiracy unraveled. Other names came to light. The judge who'd destroyed land records, the lawmen who'd looked the other way, the wealthy men who'd profited from murder. Not all would face justice, but enough would. The Fletcher land, it turned out, had indeed held gold, a rich vein that Sinclair had exploited for 2 years. By law, it would revert to Grace as the sole surviving heir. That evening, as Cedar Ridge buzzed with the news, Sam found Grace standing outside the hotel, looking lost despite her victory. You did it, he said gently. You got justice for your family. Did I? She turned to him with tears in her eyes. They're still dead. I'm still alone. What good is justice when it can't bring them back? Without thinking, Sam pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing for the family she'd lost, the home she'd never see again. The innocence burned away with her childhood. You're not alone, he murmured into her hair. Not anymore. Never again, if I have anything to say about it. She pulled back to look at him. Sam Thornton, what are you saying? I'm saying that I'm a fool who bought a woman and found something priceless. I'm saying that my house is stone and timber, but you made it a home. I'm saying. He cupped her face gently. I'm saying I love you. Grace Fletcher, not as property, not as an employee, but as the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. Sam, her voice was wondering, uncertain. I'm nobody. A mountain girl with nothing but painful memories and a piece of land I can't bear to see again. You're everything, he corrected. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. She studied his face for a long moment, then reached up to touch his cheek. You bought me as a joke. How do I know this isn't another one? Because jokes are meant to amuse, and nothing about loving you feels amusing. It feels like coming home after being lost. It feels like truth after a lifetime of pretense. He took a breath. But I understand if you need time. If you need to go back to your land, rebuild. No. Her voice was firm. That land holds only ghosts. The Double T. That's where I found life again. Where I found... What? You, she said simply. I found you, arrogant, prideful, sometimes impossible you. Who gave me freedom when you could have kept me bound? Who risked everything to fight for my justice? Who looked at a wild mountain woman and saw someone worth defending? Worth loving, he corrected. Worth cherishing. Worth building a future with, if you'll allow it. Around them, the town continued its excited chatter about the day's events, but for Sam and Grace, standing in the dusty street where their unlikely story had begun, the rest of the world faded away. Ask me again, she said softly. Grace Fletcher, will you... But she silenced him with a kiss, fierce and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Is that a yes? That's a yes to everything, she said. To your question, to the Double T, to a future I never thought I'd have. But Sam? Anything. I'll always be a mountain woman, wild and strange and given to sitting under stars. I'll never be a proper lady who hosts tea parties and worries about fashion. Thank God for that, he said fervently. I don't want a proper lady. I want you, exactly as you are. Wild heart, mountain songs, and all. As they rode home to the Double T together, the mountains stood witness to the end of one story and the beginning of another. Justice had been served, not perfectly, but truly. And from the ashes of tragedy and the ruins of arrogance, something new had grown. A love as enduring as the mountains themselves, and twice as strong. The morning sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and rose, a benediction over the valley where the Double T Ranch sprawled in peaceful prosperity. It had been 6 months since the night of fire and justice. 6 months since Grace Fletcher had stood before Garrett Sinclair and claimed her truth. Now, on this crisp October morning, the ranch prepared for a different sort of gathering. Sam Thornton stood before his mirror, fumbling with his string tie for the 3rd time. His hands, so steady with a gun or rope, trembled slightly as he attempted to make himself presentable. You're going to strangle yourself if you keep pulling at that thing, Tom Rodriguez observed from the doorway, grinning. It needs to be perfect, Sam muttered. Boss, you could wear a feed sack and she'd still say yes. She already did say yes. Remember? Sam abandoned the tie temporarily. That was different. That was... in the moment? This is in front of the whole town. What if she's changed her mind? Tom laughed outright. Have you met Grace Fletcher? That woman doesn't change her mind once it's made up. Besides, she's the one who insisted on doing this proper, in front of everyone. That was true. When Sam had suggested a quiet ceremony with just the ranch hands as witnesses. Grace had given him that look, the one that could stop a charging bull in its tracks. I hid for 2 years, she'd said. No more hiding. We do this in daylight, in front of Cedar Ridge, so everyone knows where we stand. Now, as wagons and riders began arriving for the ceremony, Sam understood her wisdom. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement. The woman who'd been bought for $10, mocked as a savage, nearly murdered for her land. She would stand in the heart of town and claim her place as an equal, as a wife, as a survivor who'd found love in the ashes of loss. In the room that had become hers at the main house, Grace faced her own reflection. Maria, the cook's wife, fussed with a simple but elegant dress they'd had made in Denver. It was deep blue, the color of mountain lakes, with subtle embroidery that echoed the wild flowers of the high country. You look beautiful, mija, Maria said softly. Grace touched the dress wonderingly. I never thought I'd wear something like this. My mother had a dress she saved for special occasions, blue, like this one. Her voice caught slightly. I wish she could see this. She sees, Maria said firmly. The ones who love us, they always see. A knock at the door interrupted them. Grace, it's Eleanor Pike. May I come in? Grace and Maria exchanged surprised glances. Eleanor Pike, who'd humiliated Grace at the harvest fair, who'd called her a savage and worse. What could she want? Come in, Grace called. curious despite herself. Eleanor entered, looking uncharacteristically humble. In her hands was a small wooden box. I wanted to apologize. Eleanor began, the words clearly difficult for her. What I said at the fair was cruel and wrong. You were right to call me out for it. All of us. Really. She held out the box. This was my grandmother's. She came west in '49, one of the first women in these parts. She faced her own struggles, her own prejudices. I think she would have liked you. Grace opened the box to find a delicate silver hair comb adorned with small pearls. Simple, elegant, perfect. I can't accept this, Grace said softly. Please, let it be. A peace offering. A welcome to the community you always should have had. Eleanor's voice broke slightly. You saved this town from men like Sinclair. Showed us truths about ourselves we needed to see. The least I can do is offer a wedding gift and an apology. Grace studied the other woman's face, seeing genuine remorse. Slowly, she nodded. Thank you for the gift and the words. Both are accepted. Eleanor left with tears in her eyes, and Maria helped Grace secure the comb in her hair, now braided in an elegant crown rather than hanging wild. There, Maria said. Now you're ready. The ceremony was held in the town square, beneath the same cottonwood trees where Grace had once stood as Sam's purchase. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the bride and groom. But where once there had been mockery and shame, now there was celebration and respect. The crowd was larger than expected. All the Double T hands were there, of course, scrubbed and uncomfortable in their best clothes. But so were many townspeople, ranchers from neighboring spreads, and even some mountain families who'd heard of Grace Fletcher's justice and come to honor one of their own. As Grace walked down the makeshift aisle, Sam forgot to breathe. She moved with the same sure grace she'd shown that night charging the arsonists. But now there was peace in her bearing, joy in her eyes. When she reached him and took his hand, he felt the circle closing, from that auction platform to this moment of choosing. Judge Patterson, who'd helped ensure Sinclair faced justice, performed the ceremony. His words were simple but carried weight in this place where law had once been corrupted for profit. Do you, Samuel Thornton, take this woman as your lawful wife, to cherish and protect, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, so long as you both shall live? I do, Sam said, his voice carrying clear and strong. I bought her freedom once, but she freely gave me my soul. I do, now and always. The judge turned to Grace. Do you, Grace Fletcher, take this man as your lawful husband, to stand beside, to challenge and support, in storm and sunshine, so long as you both shall live? Grace looked up at Sam, and in her pale eyes he saw their whole journey, the auction, the storm, the fire, the justice, and all the quiet moments between that had built into love. He brought me here as a joke, she said, loud enough for all to hear. But I learned that even jokes can become miracles if you let them. Yes, I take him. Not as owner, not as master, but as partner, as equal, as the man who looked past the mountain wildness and saw my heart. I do, with all that I am. When the judge pronounced them married and Sam kissed his bride, the cheer that went up could be heard clear to the mountains. Even some who'd mocked Grace before found themselves wiping away tears, moved by the transformation they'd witnessed. The celebration that followed filled the town square with music and laughter. Sam had spared no expense. Tables groaned with food. Musicians played lively reels, and the dancing went on as stars began to appear overhead. At one point, Grace found herself standing with Tom Rodriguez, watching Sam attempt to teach Miguel's young son a dance step. He's changed, Tom observed. The man I used to work for would never have made a fool of himself in public like that. We've all changed, Grace replied. That's what truth does. Changes everything it touches. You saved us, you know. Not just from Sinclair's men that night, from ourselves, from becoming the kind of people who could watch injustice and do nothing. Grace shook her head. I didn't save anyone. We saved each other. That's the only way it works." As the evening wore on, Grace slipped away from the crowd for a moment, needing air. She found herself at the edge of the square, looking toward the mountains that had been her first home. "Mother, Father, Daniel, James," she whispered. "I hope you can see this. I hope you know that your deaths weren't for nothing, that justice came, slow but sure, that your wild mountain daughter found her place in this world." "They know." Sam's voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. "And they're proud. How could they not be?" "I miss them," she said simply. "I know, and you always will. But we'll build something here. Grace, a family, a legacy. We'll teach our children." "Our children?" She turned in his arms, eyebrow raised. "Well, I assumed, hoped." For once, smooth-talking Sam Thornton was at a loss for words. Grace laughed, the sound like mountain water over stones. "Yes, our children, who'll grow up knowing both worlds, the ranch and the mountains, who'll be raised on stories of justice and courage and the power of truth, who'll know that no one, no matter how wild or different, is less than human. Our children will be lucky to have you for a mother, and you for a father, though God help us if they inherit your arrogance and my stubbornness. They'll be forces of nature." Sam agreed, pulling her close, just like their mother. As they stood there, the celebration continuing behind them and the eternal mountains standing witness before them, a wolf howled in the distance. Grace tilted her head, listening, then smiled. "What is it?" Sam asked. "Welcome," she translated. "The mountain sends its welcome to the new path we're walking. Do you really understand what the wolves say?" She looked up at him, mischief dancing in those pale eyes that had first captured him with their fierce dignity. "Maybe, or maybe I just like seeing that look on your face when I pretend I do." Sam laughed, spinning her around. "Mountain woman, you'll be the death of me yet." "No," she said seriously, catching his face between her hands. "I'll be the life of you, as you've been the life of me. That's what love does. Sam Thornton, it brings dead things back to life." He kissed her then, there on the edge of wilderness and civilization, and felt the truth of her words in his bones. They'd started with a cruel joke, a man's arrogance and a woman's desperate survival. But from those unpromising seeds had grown something beautiful and strong, a love that could weather any storm, face any threat, and stand as tall as the mountains themselves. As they walked back to the celebration, hand in hand, Cedar Ridge's newest married couple carried with them the promise of all the years to come. Years of work and joy, struggle and triumph, always together, always equals, always choosing each other as surely as the mountains chose to kiss the sky each dawn. The woman who'd once stood on an auction block now stood as mistress of the largest ranch in 3 counties. The man who'd bought her as a jest now knew her as his salvation. And in the annals of Cedar Ridge, their story would be told for generations, a reminder that love can bloom in the rockiest soil, that justice delayed is not always justice denied, and that sometimes, just sometimes, what begins as mankind's cruelty can end as God's own grace. Thank you all for listening to this story of love, justice, and redemption in the Wild West. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale from, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps even somewhere out in the wide open spaces that Grace and Sam would recognize. Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel if you enjoyed this story, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps us bring more of these authentic frontier tales to life. Until next time, may you find your own courage to face life's storms and the wisdom to recognize love when it comes calling, no matter how unexpected its form.